Welcome to another episode of the ASQ podcast, where we focus on life, leadership, and culture. Today, we're diving into the crisis of modern life, a world where material wealth and endless technological advancement still haven't cured inner emptiness. Anxiety, depression, and a growing sense of disconnect are widespread. Join us as we explore why that is and how we can start to reclaim a life of purpose and connection. Stay tuned.
So what are we doing today?
Well, we're talking about the modern disconnect.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I've been wanting to do this, right?
You have.
Because it's one of those things that, in these episodes that we're going to be seeing coming soon it's going to be leading up to, one of the books that we're going to be putting out, right?
Mm-hmm. The book that you're writing.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think this is a great opportunity to start giving our listeners and people a glimpse into what that book is going to be about. Mm-hmm. And I think there was no better place to start than that, our modern disconnect.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So when I heard modern disconnect, I thought, what does he mean by that? Like, what does that mean? And I didn't look it up because I wanted to kind of go into this episode with, some curiosity and wanting to be able to ask questions about this and get your perspective on it, especially since you're writing a book on this, right?
Yeah.
But I do have a definition for, our audience or our listeners. The modern disconnect refers to the pervasive feeling of emptiness, lack of meaning, and existential anxiety that many individuals face despite living in a world of material abundance and unprecedented scientific knowledge.
Correct. Yeah.
And at first I was like, what? I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
technically, right, our logic, right, the way that we think and the things that we are able to discover through the scientific means, through technology, right, those things were meant, at least in theory, to make our lives better. Right, and improve our lives, to improve our connection with one another, right? But that hasn't truly been the case, right? We live in a time in which there is a major disconnect. Social media is so accessible, but yet most people feel alone. Some people have a difficult time finding partners. Connecting at work, connecting with people. So it kind of like brings a big question, right? We have access to all these things and we live better than any other peoples in history, but yet there's this yearning and this emptiness that we feel, so I want to kind of like go into that and explore that and kind of and begin to theoretically, from my point of view, as I'm doing this, begin to question and maybe provide some guidance, not answers, but guidance from what might help me and then how potentially that could help somebody else. So that's what we see. I mean, I'm not being anecdotal, right? I mean, if you look at the numbers, the crisis of mental health, the crisis of anxiety, the crises that we're facing on a regular basis, these are real issues that we're having. So where does it all stem from when we have everything, for the most part, at our disposal? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, definitely.
Or interesting dilemma.
That's even better, dilemma.
Yep.
So I have a quote that sort of encompasses what the definition that we just gave out, and that is by Carl Jung. And it says, the more a man lays stress on false possessions and the less sensitivity he has for what is essential, the less satisfying is his life. That's deep.
It is. Right? Because if you look at it, right, what is essential to life? Right? So this is one of those philosophical questions, right, that people have been answering. This is what Socrates used to do, walking around Athens, asking the questions, what is a good life? What does it mean to live a good life? Right? What are the essentials to living that good life? Right? And what Jung is saying, and this is from his book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, is asking, are material possessions really what's essential to life? So that encompasses a lot of the issues that we're confronting right now at the moment, because yes, everybody's striving for more material goods.
It's interesting to me because I was looking at I was looking at some purses last night online, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just sharing this for our audience. And this is what you were just talking about. It just kind of, so I'm using anecdotal in a way for me. And I was looking at Louis Vuitton purses, right? And, you know, they're durable, they last, they're made out of really good material, but the price tag is hefty. You know, we're talking about the purse that I want, like the big, nice, you know, purse is like $3,500. And I remember, you know, last night you grabbed my phone and you were like, oh, what are you looking at, Plums? And I was like, oh, I was looking, you know, and you're like, is this what you want? And I'm like, in my mind, I was being sarcastic or facetious, but I don't want that. I thought, can I have this style purse, but pay $40 or even $50 or $80? I'll pay $50 or $80 for a purse, but I just can't bring myself to pay this much. But for some people, when we're talking about the modern disconnect, that is a necessity for them. That is their essential.
But
so
again,
is that what you're
so
referring to?
that's part of it.
It's
you
an
know,
anecdote,
I'm not here to judge anybody and what they decide to do, but you know, what's the purpose of a purse?
But
but like again, essentially, what is the purpose of it?
To carry things.
To carry things. Is a Louis Vuitton bag essential to carry things? No, right? But what does it really represent then?
It represents status.
It represents status.
It represents that I dropped $3,500
exactly.
for this
It
purse.
represents that my physical possessions and the way that I look to the outside world, right? It's really what gives me value, right? And that's true only up to a certain point. Because you could only consume so much, right? And this is the question. This is really where the disconnect comes about, right? Because in essence, then we have to ask the question, and it's like, what are we really as human beings, and what are we here for, right? So those are questions that are very interesting. Again, I'm not judging, condemning or condoning what people do with their money, right? But if you look at the essentials of life, connection, right, belonging, right, we look for those things, right, by means that may not actually be beneficial to us. And those are the things that we have to really kind of like begin to really think about. And that's the reason why you see in the rise, because it doesn't matter how much you get, almost to a point, right? Then things become perturbed, right? I'm gonna give you a case in point before we start getting into some details, right? I grew up in the 90s, right? I love hip hop, I love Def Jam, love Bad Boy, and Puff Daddy was a big part of that. Puff Daddy was a big part of our musical upbringing, from Jodeci to Mary J. Blige, Craig Mack, 112, Biggie, and all that stuff, right? But look at how that quest for that power turned into. So what was the essential thing about life for him, right? It's unfortunate. It's a very tragic story for him and for everybody else that was affected by it, right? But again, what was the essentiality of that, right? That quest for power and control, right? And look at the damage and the disconnect that it caused just from one person. Right. So we have to start looking at that again. Again, it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing this. We have darkness in us. It is inevitable that if a person doesn't see the darkness in them, there's something, we all have it. We all have the potentiality for it, but we have to be aware to understand what are those things that are temporary and those things that are, primal and beautiful. And those are the things that we have to start differentiating. And that's the issue with the discontent.
So I understand what you're saying, and I agree. I mean, I talk about the dark side too in my research and stuff and whatever that I've done. And I'm trying to formulate the question so it makes sense. So anxiety, depression, that we say that in our intro, it's like on the rise. It's increasing by God knows how many, whatever. And the way that people think, and what I'm trying to get at is, for some people, buying something nice, or by having a nice car, or having nice clothes, or whatever, it does bring them happiness, and they don't necessarily struggle with anxiety, stress, depression, and all this other stuff. So why do you think that some people fall victim to that? The stresses, the anxiety, and some people are completely content with, I have nice things, I want nice things, I don't care what anybody says, and I'm going to live my life and I'm good with it.
Yep.
Like there's a difference in those types of people, A and B, for example.
So, and of course, I mean, everything's situational and individualistic, right? So if you feel content with your life, you don't have that anxiety and you don't have that, by all means, just live your life, right?
So you're speaking to an audience that
feel, and again, the numbers are there, the data is there about even people that may seem like they're not doing that. Deep down inside, everybody knows themselves and they know that need, and they know like, whoa, what is the disconnect right now? And I think it's going to get worse, right? Because of the advancements in technology, particularly AI, right? Think about the fact that for most of our lives, what gives us purpose and what gives us meaning is the things that we do, our jobs, the function that we play in society, right? So the question is really, what is a human life, right? What is the meaning of a human life when those jobs and things are now being done by robots, AI, and things like that? What is the meaning of a life then? And you see it happening little by little. Jobs are getting, most jobs that people have are remedial and it's repetitive and things of that nature, right? So you have to start looking at the rise of technology, and this is always something that happens in our society. So in reality, it's really looking at the functions that we play, but also what does it mean to be a human life under any circumstance? Because things will change. And robots and technology are going to start taking jobs to do, from people to do. That's not something to fight against. The real reason is going back to, okay, if possessions of a job or a career or something like that no longer really is essential to defining who I am, then what is?
What do you have left, right?
Then what is, right?
So then the point to that, the resolve to that is to...
Well, the result to that is to begin your quest, to start really questioning about what is it that you want to do? What is it that it means to be a human life? This is a question that everybody philosophers have been trying to answer. And the answer changes, right? Because of time and place, right? The answers that you got during ancient times, right? In which, technology was like at a very, very primitive stage, right? And that time, that frame, that effort that took place at that time no longer applies to our time. It no longer does. It's different. We have advanced. We have used our faculties of thinking to create a world in which we could choose, right, to have more time. So what do we do with that time? How do we give our lives meaning in a changing world in which work has changed, right?
Do you think people don't realize that is happening? That they're just so caught up with like the everyday, ins and outs and whatever, that they don't realize how rapid this is. When I found out about like AI, ChatGPT and stuff. So I knew AI existed. Excuse me. But I didn't really understand ChatGPT. And I found out about it after I wrote my dissertation, which I remember saying, what the hell? Why didn't you tell me about this then? Which I'm glad I didn't know about it then, because I actually thoughtfully put my effort into writing this book, right? And most people do. I'm not saying people use ChatGPT to write everything. That's not my point. But when I used it, I was like, holy shit. What the hell is this? Yeah. Because I was like, this has been around? This is what's coming down the, It's
coming down, yeah.
But do you think that people don't realize it because they're just so caught up? And do you think maybe we're just so caught up in stuff that we don't stop to question until we're down and out and we're depressed and feeling overwhelmed and stressed and whatever, and we just like don't have an answer at all and everything is just wrong?
Yeah. So it's a complicated answer, right? Because our emotions, right? Anxiety and all those emotions, right? They're like post signs that something's not right, right? From a primitive standpoint, right? When we feel fear, it's because we have to protect ourselves from something, right? There's a threat, right? So a lot of the times we don't understand what the threat is, right? Because we're not taught about it, right? Nobody really talks about what, if you really think about our politics, everybody says, we want to get more jobs, we want to get more jobs, we want to bring jobs. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting because on the other side, you have AI, you have robotics, which are expanding dramatically and an exponential rate, that jobs that will pay that people raise the family with, they're not there anymore. And then in conjunction to that, you have the rise of real estate entrepreneurs with jack up prices. So you have this thing, and I don't think people really take the time to look at it from a macro point of view and realize, whoa, what's happening, right? This is one of Karl Marx's criticism of capitalism, right? It's the fact that you will get to a point where things are so efficiently done that human beings are going to be looking at each other and like, what do we do? And then the fear and the anxiety to realize that. But it's been happening since the dawn of civilizations. The creation of tools, the creations of technology to make to expand our capacity of power from the plow, all the way now to almost, driverless cars. I mean, like, most planes, most things are beginning to run in automation. Is it a bad thing? Maybe not, right? But then it begs the question, then now what do we do, right? And how do we live a human life when we no longer have to toil as hard, right? I'm firmly believe, right, that if really someone looks at our economic system as it is right now, so objectively and from a macro standpoint, people realize, things have to change. And you see it like with the research of universal income. You see conversations happening because there are people that are really seeing this. But I think the average individual, it's not aware of that. We are distracted by, oh my God, how am I going to pay my bills? Oh my God, how am I going to do this? Oh my God, how am I going to do that?
Well, and to be honest with you, it's a cycle. It keeps going, because you're saying that people are worried about paying bills, but then society implements these things, the costs go higher.
Correct.
I mean, and
people make less money because there's automation that's taking people's jobs.
That are affecting jobs.
And
and the jobs that are left out there, they're not going to pay as much. I mean, it's sort of like this really vicious cycle that's going on.
So when you really look at it, right, now that and then people hide themselves in gaining things or working hard to gain more stuff. But again, it goes back to that. And again, a lot of the criticisms of society that you hear are negative, right? It's like that movie They See Us. People are trying to control us, or the system is taking over from us, right? The reality of the fact is, like, no one knows what to do. Life is an experiment of trying to figure things out, right? And some people have an opinion on one side, some person has another opinion on the other, right? So in the midst of it all, we know, oh my God, what is happening? What's happening, right? People are more aggressive towards one another. The sense of community is kind of dissipating.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a lot of that has to do with that, what you were talking about earlier, the fear, the uncertainty, anxiety, stress, all those things. And one of the things that I wanted to tell you or talk about too is that a lot of people start to experience anxiety, stress, depression, and immediately the resolve is, I need to, and it's not bad to talk to a therapist, but then immediately I got to speak to a therapist. There's something wrong with me. I got to get, like, it's not okay to experience things or experience those feelings and then either reach out to somebody to help them define what those things are. or
Yep.
to look inward to find out what that is, or they just get medication to resolve that issue.
Yep. So one of the things that I'm realizing more working in this field, right, with humans, is how little emphasis is put on the environment of that the person is in, right? And again, from a macro standpoint, look at the environment that we're in, right? The environment is a tense environment, right? It's an environment of uncertainty. We see in all these technologies coming up, right? You're seeing, I remember a couple of months ago, not too long ago, the longshoremen were on strike, right? Mm-hmm. And they're concerned about keeping their jobs because automation is coming. And it's like you have these big ports in which it doesn't really require manpower. And everything runs, even the freight boats are just
the freight boats,
boats, right? There, a lot of the stuff is on automation, so these people are concerned about what's going to happen with my life, my livelihood, right? These are real issues, right? Now, it's technology and the advancement of automation in and of itself, right? Now, the real question is, okay, if that's going to be the case, what's going to be the way, right, in which we live a human life? You know, the goal of a civilization, right, was like pretty much pulling all efforts and everything to farm, to do all those things, right, originally, so that everybody could benefit from it. And then as time progressed, we created money so that everybody could have access to things without having to barter and all that stuff. And as things progressed and technology advanced, right, because we were able to produce more food than ever before. And now we're able to do a lot of those things a lot more efficiently than ever before, right, and with less manpower. Then what is the meaning of a human life? And this is a fucking scary place if we don't think about it, right? And what you're seeing now is a lack of realizing, is the thing. Now, the beauty of it all, right, is that this is the goal of following your own life, right? Because the next evolution, right, it's a human evolution. Because the minutiae things, or the mundane things that we have to do on a regular basis will be taken out, right? So now we have to really go into the quest, right? Because it's always happened like that. Yeah. This has always happened. That's what evolution is. What is going to be the next evolution of what it means to be a human being? And this is why it's so important. And this is what I think people are not really looking into, the disconnect. Yeah.
So can you talk to me about what Jung calls false possessions, just to go into that, and then I want to go into other things after that.
So, like, false possessions are the things that we think give our lives meaning, right?
Okay, which is what I have this talking about.
Yeah, I have this thing that I call function and form, right? So within a scale, within a society, right, we play a function. We could be a son, we could be a daughter, we could be a mother, we could be a father, you know, and we have a profession. Right? And those things, a title, you know, a status, those are possessions that give ourselves meaning, right? And now when you take it to another point, right, sometimes we work ourselves really, really hard to gain possessions that are going to give us more of that sense of being, right, that defines who we are, right? It's like, I don't have a car, I have a Maserati, you know? Like, I don't have, this is what I have. I have this. I've gone here and I've done this and I've done that, right? Those are possessions that give us meaning, that give us an identity, right? But those things are superficial and elementary as to what we are, right? And the idea, this has always been the idea of every mythology and religion, is to really identify with something much, much deeper than the superficial, right? Right? Yeah. We are a way for the universe to know itself type thing, right? Love that quote.
I've struggled with this false possessions. That's why I was interested in what you were thinking, what your point of view was on it, your perspective.
Yeah. Because
it's serious. It's a serious issue.
It is. I mean, like, we work so hard. Think about it from a young person, right? You go to school, right? And let's say you're the top 15% of your class, right? And you go to school, everybody, you're great, you got A's and B's, you get recognition, you go to college, you do this, and then you go to work, and then you find work miserable, right? And it's like, oh my God, I did all this, and everybody told me I was so great. I don't feel so great. right?
How about just being a simple mom?
Right?
Like that was, for the longest time, that was my identity.
Yeah.
I want to be a good mom. I want to do this because I want to be a good mom. I gotta, stay connected to my children because I'm a good mom, even as they're adults, and because we're empty nesters, right?
Yeah.
And I think for a period there, once everybody left the house, once our kids left the house, there was a sense of emptiness that I felt.
Yeah.
And that I remember I feel like a late bloomer because I'd gone through all this stuff that you have already gone through. So sometimes I stare at you and I think, what? And I don't get all this stuff because I didn't experience it or didn't know I was experiencing it. And I remember you saying, you need to find you because that what you had, you're a great mom, whatever it is that you said. And it was a long road for me to understand that my kids do not define who I am.
Yeah. It was a function that you performed.
Correct.
For a period of time.
And the function that I performed well. I did my job.
Correct.
I did what I was supposed to do. Now we're grandparents.
Yes.
To a beautiful little baby.
Yeah. And those things change, right?
Yeah.
But then what happens is, and this is what, again, I'm just throwing kind of theories, but this is what Eric Erickson talked about, the crisis is when you're transitioning from one stage of life to another because you lose, right? The possession.
You do.
The temporary identity that you have, right? Now, the idea is, and this is what the role of religions were supposed to be in mythologies, is to understand the underlying force and power that goes past all those different functions that you play, right? So when you look at it from a material standpoint, right? From buying things or even class, right? I think class is more of an issue than anything else, right? Because class begins to separate people because one, it's better than the other. I feel superior, I feel better, which is also a false possession of status, right? Because the underlying thing that makes you who you are is transcendent. It's like, oh.
So let me ask you a question just to go back to stay on this topic. How does somebody know that they have, like, for the longest time I didn't know that I had a false possession. I'm doing air quotes for people who are listening because I'm a mom. I'm supposed to be a mom. But then there's a place where ultimately it wasn't that I was dissatisfied with being a mom. I love being a mom. I still love being a mom. I love being a grandmother now. It's amazing. But playing that role, especially since my kids were already grown and they're doing their own thing, it wasn't a function that was pleasing to me anymore, but I didn't understand that. So without giving too many nuggets out of your book away, how does somebody come to remedy that or to identify that feeling? I mean, I can explain my own feelings, but from your perspective, because this is what you're researching and writing about.
So from the macro standpoint, right, you have to have perspective, right?
Right.
And the perspective is this, right? We are made of star stuff, right? We are, right there, right? We come from that, right? And if you start looking and contemplating into what happens in space and what happens in natures, right? Things take a certain form, they dissipate, and they take another form, right? Things transform, right? You could pick up a piece of rock, and before you know it, that rock could become a battery, right? Take cobalt, make it into a battery, which could store energy for future use, right? We are in a constant state of evolving and self-discovery and discovering more and more of who we are at the different dimensions of what we are, right? So the problem is when we get stuck, right, into one definition of who we are. What happens there, it's one, we build this barrier in which we don't see other people. We don't see, we see what we want to see.
That makes sense.
Right? And then we apply to ourselves the definition of this is what I am and that's it.
Yeah.
Right? But evolution requires us to shed, right? Like the snake shed the skin, to shed and move forward because that's life. Right? And you have to be able to find ways to not just redefine who you are, but I would say more rediscover aspects of who you are.
Rediscover.
Right?
That's
so you have to have that perspective. You have to be able to look at things And sometimes, most of the times, right? Most of the time, it happens unwillingly. This is the unfortunate part. The unfortunate part is like nobody really changes. Most people, let me rephrase that. Most people, at least not for me, my personal experience, changed willingly, right? Something had to be a catapult to change.
I think that's always kind of how it is, right?
But there's also we also have the option to be able to do it willingly if we're aware. If we begin to realize, oh my God, okay, I'm feeling this. Why am I feeling this way? I'll be transparent. I'm feeling, in the last few weeks, I've been feeling very anxious, very like, oh my God, right? And it's why? It's like, because I'm at the stage in life in which one of my priorities and one of the most important things in my life is self-expression. And expressing what I've learned throughout my life, sharing what I learned throughout my life with the intention of being a guide and helping someone. Right? And it sounds naive, but that's what I'm feeling. And the more that I do this and the more that I do the writing, the more that I go out and talk to people and see the need and like, oh my God, the craving for it, it kind of like lets me know, oh, there's something here. Keep at it.
Yeah, and I would say that it's not naive. You said that, but I think that's sort of derogatory to what it is that you are setting out for your path. And so I don't want listeners to think, oh, it is naive for me to think that, because I think there is an element of being naive about that, but it's also, it's in spite of, or against what it is that you need to do to have that freedom.
And I'm happy that you call me out from that, because that is absolutely true, right? So one of the things that I've learned.
I didn't mean to call you out.
No, but it's a very good point, because it goes to show, again, it goes to show how your mind works.
Yeah.
How
because you want to put something.
Excuse me, when you're following something and you're like, oh, I'm minimizing.
Well, exactly. That's the word I was looking for.
Minimizing it, right?
Yeah, and that's not the way that we need to approach this,
it, right? And the reality is this, right? Having this childlike mentality, right? It's part of the evolution of shedding the past, right? Because you can't create values, or you can't create anything new if you're still bound to the past. So only a child, right, could create things, Now I'm using I'm okay, you're okay, transactional analysis terminology. Only a child could create something new, right? And that's the premise of it all. And it's a hard thing to realize, right? Because also it's very vulnerable, But it's nature, right? When you look at a river, right, and you look at a riverbank, right, what does it do? It spreads. Same thing with us, right? And that's how things keep evolving. They just keep going in different directions to find the way that suits them best, And that's the same thing that has to happen with us. But I'm not saying, that's why it's a quest, and not everybody's going to be able to do it.
Right.
And not everybody has been able to do it. But those that persevere and those that go into aspects of leadership and culture purposefully, knowing what they're doing, really are the ones that make a big impact on the whole, And it could be something small, but that small action has the ripple effects that goes throughout eternity. It is an amazing thing when you start thinking about the different people in our history, right? I mean, I was thinking about Westinghouse today. And I was like, who the hell is Westinghouse? Right? Westinghouse was the one that funded Tesla so that he could have the DC power. It's like, right? It's like that was a pivotal moment in our history that was able to give us power, throughout our grid. But that, now it's just like, oh, that's a company that makes light bulbs. No, it was a person, right? Yep. But look at that little ripple effect and how that has expanded our thing. Right? And there's so many things like that people don't get to see. Westinghouse was a well-known person during his time and place, right? So it's all very interesting how we work. It's when we really start living from that underlying thing rather than the functions that we play and see in other aspects.
Okay. So you talk about the individual, right? So we focused on life. What about when it comes to leadership and culture?
Yes.
Like how do we encourage a culture where, this is, the application of this process and just creating a culture where this is okay?
Yeah.
Like how are we going to do that?
Because
ultimately as individuals, we're also leaders, right? In some capacity.
No, not in some capacity.
We are.
We are.
Right.
I mean,
people don't think so, but we are.
Yeah. In every single aspect, right? So the social change model is very simple, right? It starts with the individual. Then it goes into their families. Then it goes into their other circle of influence, right? Then it goes into the community and consequently the world. Human beings are so important, right? But because everything looks so big and so, wow, this is crazy, we don't see our significance in it, right?
Yeah.
And I go back to that Cloud Atlas line. What is an ocean but a multitude of drops?
Right.
Right? It's like the change has to happen in the person, right? A person that understands their center, they understands the underlying thing that they are, right? And lives from that point, right? And goes into things, right? Into whatever form and function within the time and place, right, in which they exist, taking actions from that center, right? Those are the people that are going to make changes. And you could do it as a mom from a period of time from that level, and as you move into something else, you do something else, and you start discovering more aspects. But it all starts with the individuals. You can't be a good leader. I don't care who it is. You could have status, you could have the power, you could have the title, right? You could have the education, you could have all that stuff. But that doesn't make you a good leader. In fact, we've experienced that, and most people have experienced that, right? The reality, the leadership is common knowledge, but it's not common practice, because the leaders that we're looking for, they come from a different place of empowerment, right? Of helping people be more, right? So that the collective benefits, right? And the movements that you see throughout history, you think of Moses, you think of Buddha, you think of God. I mean, these are big changes, but then you also see how those movements have lasted empires. But what happened to the Romans? What happened to the Assyrians? What happened to the Greeks? What happened to the British? Right? When you come from that place of possession-based and strength-based mentality, that thing has a cycle. I mean, it's right there if you look at it, right? But why is it that Muhammad's message still goes through? Jesus' message still, Moses' message, Buddha's, Lao Tzu, all these philosophers, why is it that all those things transcend, empires? Right? We need to learn from that, and create leaders that, instead of the temporary part, really believe in that thing that underlies it all, right? To me, it's the beauty of life and the ugliness of life, right? Because you look at this Darwinian way of thinking, actually, which is incorrect, the way, survival of the fittest type of thing. Those things don't last. You're going to see the cycle happening in every civilization that rises and falls. It's the same cycle. Some people go on top and take the power, but they oppress somebody else. They oppress people, get tired and fed up, and throw the person, and then it just happens again, and it happens again, and it keeps happening again, and it's going to continue to happen again. This is why this time is so pivotal, right, for the human evolution. Because are we going to continue to do the same thing in the midst of amazing technological advances that will make our lives much better and easier?
Do you think those technological advances and living a human life, do you think that's possible? Do you think we can do it?
Of course.
How, give me an example of how so?
Okay.
Because I feel like when we're talking about the modern disconnect, we're talking about all these technological advancements. And, you know, there's some times where I get caught up, you know, looking at Pinterest, looking at TikTok, looking at, you know, and I see myself and I'm like, I got to put my phone down. My God, you know, I'm not engaging with anything around me. Like how can the two be married together to avoid and avoid the modern disconnect, or at least be aware that we're going down that path? And then what are the give us one practical solution to that, but just one, because I don't want you to divulge everything now.
No. Yeah, I mean,
you gotta buy the book.
Obviously, you know, the easiest answer is like, you know, you have to make sure that you force yourself not to do that, right?
Well, yeah,
that's the answer that is the easier answer to give, right? But I'm gonna tell you a story, and I don't know if I said this before here, but I remember this. We were a Boy Scout, and we were having our summer and yearly planning meeting, Chinatown, Manhattan, at the AT&T building, and Ken took us in because he wanted one of their advertising guys to do a presentation for us, right? And they were asking no questions because they wanted us to be in a commercial or some crap like that, right? And I remember this guy. He was kind of like a dark, not Indian, but kind of like a Italian, but like, you know, a dark, like a Sicilian type guy. He was a cool guy, very cool guy, and he was explaining to us how advertisers use colors and images to manipulate our desires.
And music,
right? And he was explaining to us how different colors, you know, mean certain things and how they use it to get people to buy stuff. So he was explaining the psychology behind it, right? Yeah. So when you look at...
Interesting.
Right? When you look at really what's happening with the way that we do things, it's all psychology for the purpose of giving you possessions that you don't really need, right? And these are tactics that are used, right? And this is the algorithms that they use for the purpose of selling you stuff that you don't really need. Having you see things that you don't really need to see, nor are productive to your well-being, right? So on the macro level, it's to be able to kind of like realize as human beings who are creating these products, right? Because I don't believe there will be a regulation that will do that. Right? And this is why the individuals are so important, because there are people out there in advertising that know what they're doing, but it's like, I got to get mine.
Yeah.
Without caring what the effect is on everybody around them.
Well, if they cared, we wouldn't have this technological advancement.
Right? But the technological advancement of being connected, right? Of learning something new, of exploring different ways of being, right? And again, freedom of expression is fine. So you have to have both.
You need a balance.
You need a balance, right? You need a balance of self-control and self-autonomy, but you also need individuals who are creating stuff, right? And this is my opinion, because I don't think no government policy is going to do that, because we're going to find a way, right? To be conscientious about why we do what we do, right? Because again, I understand because this is the slippery slope. Because what about you're going to start censoring people? And it's like, no, you shouldn't censor people because people have the right to express themselves. So how do you manage that, right? And again, it's the individual. It's the individual, right? On both aspects. I don't have to partake of this, right? I don't watch the news. I don't watch Fox. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch MSNBC. I don't watch any of that stuff. Why? Everybody, as impartial as they say that they are, they're just mouthpieces for their own interests, right? Do you learn anything? No. It's just opinions, people fighting with each other. I hate debates, because debates, they don't get anywhere. They're just arguing, right? Even sports is the same thing. It's like, oh, this person should have done this. It's like, okay, I just want to watch the game. That's it, you know? So when you start looking at all this stuff, it's like, where does the individual draw the line? And where does the self-interest really, because it's so complex, right? It's like, okay, well, I got to get money. I got to live.
It's interesting.
And that's why the individual is so powerful. That's why that part of everything that we do is so key, you know?
The individual.
Yeah. You know?
The focus,
yeah. And then that, you know, it's like Jung says, it's being able to think about really what's essential. What is this? Again, going back to like, what is a good life? What does a good life look like?
Yeah. I think it takes a very serious exploration of, we've already said this, a serious exploration of that deep sense of self for the purposes of what we want to do in the life that we want to live.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes it takes a while. Maybe for some people it's earlier than others. I think that I learned, and I'm still learning.
Yeah.
What those things are at what I feel is a late stage, but I think I'm learning it right when I need to.
It's not a matter of where you are, right? Because life is a journey, right? I mean, at first you start, life is a quest, right? Because a journey implies that you're going to get somewhere, right? A quest is more like you discover things as you go along, right? And again, I tell most of the people that I work with, right, kids and young adults and even adults, right, from the moment that you are born, right, you're pitched into the world, right? You don't choose parents, where you're going to live, how you're going to look. You don't choose any of that until you start to become somewhat aware of you, right? And even then, you're living based on other things, right?
It's so funny you say that because it's so true.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're just going through the motions so often and so much. We're being directed when we're younger. We're told what to do, teachers, moms, dads, etc. And then finally we get to this place where we're like, oh, here, hey, it's me.
It doesn't.
Oh shit.
It doesn't feel good. It's like, why did I do all this for? Now, again, I don't believe that it's ill-intentioned, right? It's human beings try to create something out of what the heck is happening over here, and creating a structure that they feel that is going to work, and they pass it down, and rightly so, right? But it comes a point, and this is what you see about the disconnect, right? It comes a point in our lives, and this is what you're seeing right now, that even after you've done what's been prescribed by society, some things doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Which we've talked about in many episodes. So
something doesn't feel right. What
and
is
that's the point where you have to start questioning.
That's what Campbell called the call to the adventure. Because now, by redeeming and finding that within yourself, now you begin to redeem and you start living from there. That's what leadership is. Leadership is leading by example and living from that point. Now you start impacting culture, right? And those things happens earlier. In the past, shamans used to have a mental breakdown, and it happened when they were younger. Now we don't believe so much into this stuff, but psychologically speaking, look, the next evolution that is happening is really a human evolution rather than a technology. Technology is just there as a supplement, right? But it's interesting to see that there's no questioning why the mental health issues are on the rise, or psychological issues, and the quest for meaning in a place that sort of quote unquote has so much meaning. This is going to be an interesting quest, an interesting journey, if you choose to accept it.
Ooh, I like your movie, whatever's. If you choose to accept it, Mission Impossible.
Whatever, I am what I am, like Popeye.
Oh, you're funny. Well, this was a good sort of preface or introduction, if you will, to what it is that you're going to be talking about with the book. So I'm excited to go into more detail or just kind of explore what you're talking about. And then, of course, if you want more information, you're going to have to get the book.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, and then we'll talk about more, that's when it's coming and all the stuff and the premise of it.
Not quite ready, but
not quite
almost.
Ready, but it's getting there. It has a very good shape.
I think it's going to be very interesting. I think it's actually going to be very helpful to a lot of people, at least to open up those, when a flower starts to bud and it starts to open, it's going to peak that, you know what I mean? And I think that that's really what is going to be the butterfly effect for hopefully making a change, even if it's just in your tight-knit community.
Exactly. And that's the intention. The intention is to live from that center
and to create an awareness
and to create, most of the time it feels really good. So that's also a beautiful byproduct of doing something that comes from inside.
Yeah, I agree. If these themes resonate with you, How can ASQ offer additional insight into navigating this search for deeper meaning and purpose? We encourage you to join the email list for the upcoming book, A Soul's Quest, The Transformational Approach to Life, Part 1, by scanning the QR code here or clicking the link in the description. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes.